When I traded my farm for city life, my son's wife said, "We don't want someone filthy living with us." Desperate for money, I started taking care of horses for an aristocratic family. I cured the billionaire's 5-year-old daughter's emotional support horse. When he saw her smiling and riding again, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The moving truck disappeared around the corner, taking with it the last pieces of my life at Riverside Farm. 63 years old, and I was standing on my son's doorstep with nothing but 2 suitcases and a heart full of shame. The farm that had been in our family for 3 generations was gone, sold to pay off debts I never saw coming. Stuart opened the door before I could knock. My boy looked tired, older than his 35 years, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Behind him I could see Azalea hovering in the hallway, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her crossed arms. "Hi, Mama," Stuart said, but his voice lacked warmth. He glanced over his shoulder at his wife, then back at me. "Come on in." I stepped into their pristine living room, my worn boots feeling foreign against the white marble floors. Everything gleamed under the crystal chandelier, not a speck of dust or a thing out of place. It was beautiful, but cold. Nothing like the warm chaos of the farmhouse where Stuart had grown up. "So," Azalea said, her voice sharp as winter wind, "how long exactly are you planning to stay?" The question hit me like a slap. I'd been there less than 2 minutes. "Azalea," Stuart warned quietly, but there was no real force behind it. "What?" "I'm just asking a reasonable question." She stepped closer, her pale blue eyes examining me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. "I mean, look at her, Stuart. She's covered in dirt." I looked down at my clothes, the same jeans and flannel shirt I'd worn while packing the last of my things. There were stains from tears I'd cried while boxing up my mother's china, dirt from kneeling in the garden one final time to say goodbye to the roses she'd planted 50 years ago. "I can clean up," I said quietly, hating how small my voice sounded. Azalea laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Clean up? Honey, this isn't about a shower. This is about—" She gestured vaguely at me. "This whole situation. We have a certain standard here. Neighbors. A reputation to maintain." Stuart shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we could set up the guest room." "Absolutely not." Azalea's voice turned ice cold. "I won't have someone like this living in our home. What would people think?" Someone like this. The words echoed in my head as I stood there, feeling smaller by the second. I'd raised this boy, worked 3 jobs after his father died to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I'd sat up nights when he was sick, cheered at every baseball game, taught him how to drive in that old pickup truck. And now his wife was calling me someone like this. "Azalea, please," Stuart said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's my mother." "And I'm your wife." She moved to stand beside him, her hand possessive on his arm. "The mother of your future children. Don't you want them to have the best possible environment? Future children." The words twisted in my chest. I'd dreamed of being a grandmother, of teaching little ones how to collect eggs and milk cows, how to find the sweetest blackberries and watch fireflies dance at dusk. But looking at Azalea's disgusted expression, I realized those dreams were as dead as my farm. "Look," Azalea continued, her tone shifting to fake sweetness, "I'm not heartless. There's a solution here." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through it. "The Whitmores are looking for someone to take care of their horses. It's not much money, but it comes with a small room above the stables. Very rustic." She said rustic like it was a dirty word. "The Whitmores?" Stuart looked confused. "You mean that family with the big estate outside town?" "Exactly. Old money, very proper. They need someone reliable to muck stalls and feed horses. Perfect for someone with your mother's background." I felt my face burn with humiliation. She was talking about me like I wasn't standing right there, like I was some piece of furniture to be disposed of. But the terrible truth was, I needed work. The money from selling the farm had gone entirely to paying off the creditors. I had exactly $237 to my name. "How much does it pay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Azalea smiled triumphantly. $800 a month, plus the room. Very generous considering. Considering what? Considering that I was desperate? Considering that her precious husband wasn't man enough to stand up for his own mother? Stuart finally looked at me, and for a moment I saw something like regret in his eyes. "Mama, you don't have to." "Yes, she does," Azalea interrupted. "Unless she has somewhere else to go?" We all knew I didn't. My sister lived in Florida with barely enough space for herself. My few remaining friends were struggling with their own problems. At 63, with no formal education and a lifetime of farm work behind me, my options were limited. "I'll take it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Azalea clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. I'll call Mrs. Whitmore right now. You can start tomorrow." She was already dialing as she walked toward the kitchen, leaving Stuart and me standing awkwardly in the living room. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was nervous. "Mama, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted." "It's fine, Stuart." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Your wife has made her feelings clear. She's just particular about things. You know how women can be. No, I wanted to say. I know how cruel people can be. But I kept my mouth shut. This boy was all the family I had left, and even if he was too weak to defend me, I couldn't bear to lose him completely. From the kitchen, I could hear Azalea's voice, bright and cheerful as she spoke to Mrs. Whitmore. "Oh, yes, she's very experienced with horses. Been working with them her whole life. Yes, she can start immediately." My whole life. That part was true, at least. I'd grown up around horses, learned to ride before I could properly walk. But somehow, hearing Azalea package my desperation as experience made it hurt worse. "It's settled," Azalea announced, returning with a satisfied smile. "Mrs. Whitmore will expect you at 8 tomorrow morning. The address is on Maple Ridge Road. You can't miss it, it's the biggest house for miles." She handed me a piece of paper with directions written in her precise handwriting. Below the address, she'd written Velma Hartwell, stable hand, in capital letters, like she was labeling me for delivery. "I should go get settled then," I said, picking up my suitcases. "Actually," Azalea said, "you'll need to take the bus. We can't have our car smelling like, well, you understand. The bus." I hadn't ridden a bus in 30 years, but I nodded, swallowing what was left of my pride. Stuart walked me to the door, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mama, this is temporary, just until you get back on your feet." I looked at my son, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, and saw a stranger. "Take care of yourself, Stuart." "I will. And Mama? Don't take anything Azalea says personally. She's just protecting her territory. I understand." I walked away from that house feeling like I was burying another piece of myself. First the farm, now my relationship with my only child. At 63, I was starting over with nothing but the clothes on my back and a job mucking stalls for people who saw me as nothing more than hired help. But as I sat on that bus, watching the city give way to rolling hills and horse pastures, something stirred in my chest. It wasn't hope. That felt too dangerous. But it was something. Maybe it was just stubbornness, the same trait that had gotten me through 30 years of farming alone after my husband died. The Whitmore estate sprawled across hundreds of acres, with a main house that looked like something from a movie, and stables that were probably nicer than most people's homes. As I walked up the gravel driveway with my suitcases, I caught sight of horses in the distant pastures, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. At least I'd be working with creatures who didn't judge me by the dirt under my fingernails or the patch on my jacket sleeve. Horses had always understood me better than people anyway. I just had no idea that this job, this last resort, would change everything. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore was nothing like I'd expected. Where Azalea was sharp angles and cold edges, Catherine was soft-spoken and genuinely kind. She met me at the stable entrance with a warm smile and apologetic eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry about the accommodations," she said, gesturing toward the small apartment above the stables. "It's not much, but it's clean and private." Not much turned out to be a cozy loft with a kitchenette, a comfortable bed, and windows that looked out over the pastures. After sleeping in my truck for 2 nights before Stuart finally answered my calls, it felt like luxury. "It's perfect," I assured her, and meant it. Catherine showed me around the property. 12 horses, each one worth more than I'd ever seen in my bank account. The stables were immaculate, with brass nameplates on each stall, and equipment that looked like it belonged in a palace. "Most of the horses are easy," Catherine explained as we walked. "But we have one special case." "Oh," she paused in front of a stall at the end of the barn. "This is Thunder." The horse inside was magnificent, a black stallion with white markings on his face and legs. But something was wrong with him. He stood pressed against the far wall of his stall, head low, muscles tense. When I approached the gate, he snorted and backed away further. "He's been like this for months," Catherine said quietly. "Ever since the accident." "What kind of accident?" Catherine's face clouded over. "A trailer wreck. Thunder was badly injured, but he healed. Physically, anyway. It's Emma who worries me most." "Emma?" "My daughter. She's 5. Thunder was her best friend before." Catherine trailed off, watching the horse with troubled eyes. "She won't go near him now. Won't go near any of the horses. She barely speaks anymore." As if summoned by our conversation, a small figure appeared at the stable entrance. The little girl had her mother's dark hair and delicate features, but her eyes held a sadness no child should carry. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Thunder's stall with an expression of pure terror. "Emma, sweetheart," Catherine called softly. "Come meet Mrs. Hartwell. She's going to help take care of the horses." Emma shook her head violently and ran back toward the house. "She used to spend hours here," Catherine said, her voice breaking slightly, brushing Thunder, talking to him about everything and nothing. Now she won't even walk past the stables. I studied Thunder more carefully. The physical scars from his injuries were barely visible, but the emotional wounds were written all over his body language. I'd seen horses like this before. Animals so traumatized they'd forgotten how to trust. "How long has he been like this?" I asked. 6 months. We've had 3 different trainers try to work with him. They all said the same thing, that he's too damaged, that we should put him down." Catherine's voice hardened. "My husband is starting to agree with them." "And Emma?" "She has nightmares. The therapist says she has PTSD at 5 years old." Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I keep thinking if I could just get Thunder back to normal, maybe Emma would heal too. They were so connected before." I spent the rest of that first day learning the routines, feeding horses, mucking stalls. The work was familiar and comforting, reminding me of better times when my own barn was full of life. But my eyes kept drifting to Thunder's stall, and my heart kept breaking for the little girl who was too scared to visit her best friend. That evening, after Catherine had gone back to the house, I sat in a chair outside Thunder's stall. He watched me warily from the corner, every muscle ready to bolt. I didn't try to approach him. Instead, I talked. "I know how you feel, boy," I said quietly. "Sometimes the world just breaks something inside us, doesn't it? Makes us forget how to trust, how to hope." Thunder's ears twitched forward slightly, the first sign of interest he'd shown. "I used to have a farm," I continued, settling back in my chair. "Had a horse a lot like you. Name was Midnight, big black gelding with white socks, stubborn as the day was long." Thunder took a small step forward. "Midnight got spooked by a snake one day, threw me right into a fence post, broke 3 ribs and my collarbone." I paused, remembering. For weeks after, every time I got near him, he'd shy away, like he was ashamed of what happened, like he thought I blamed him. Another step forward. But I didn't blame him. Accidents happen. Sometimes we get hurt, and nobody's really at fault. We just have to figure out how to trust again. By the time I finished talking, Thunder was standing at the front of his stall, still wary but listening. It was progress. My phone rang, startling both Thunder and me. He bolted back to his corner while I fumbled for the device. Stuart's name flashed on the screen. "Hello? Mama? How's the new job going?" His voice sounded strained. "Fine. The Whitmores are nice people." Good. Listen, I was wondering." He paused, and I could hear Azalea's voice in the background, sharp and insistent. We've got some unexpected expenses coming up. Car repairs, Azalea's medical bills. Could you maybe help us out? My heart sank. Medical bills. Is Azalea sick? Oh no, nothing serious. Just some cosmetic procedures. You know how important appearance is in her line of work. Cosmetic procedures. I was living in a stable loft, working for $800 a month, and they wanted money for cosmetic procedures. I don't have any money to spare, Stuart. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. Come on, Mama, it's not that much. Just $500. We'll pay you back. $500. More than half my monthly income. I can't afford that. The silence stretched between us, filled with Azalea's increasingly agitated voice in the background. Fine, Stuart said finally, his tone turning cold. I should have known you'd be selfish about this. After everything we did for you. Everything they did for me. Like kicking me out of their house? Like making me feel worthless and unwanted? Stuart, whatever, Mama, don't worry about it. We'll figure something else out. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. My own son, asking me for money I didn't have while his wife got cosmetic procedures. The boy I'd raised to be better than this. Thunder nickered softly from his stall, as if sensing my distress. When I looked up, he was watching me with those intelligent dark eyes, his ears forward with concern. Guess we're both a little broken, aren't we, boy? I said softly. The next morning brought new challenges. Emma appeared at breakfast time, clutching a worn stuffed horse to her chest. Catherine introduced us properly, but Emma just stared at me with those haunted eyes and didn't say a word. She used to chatter constantly, Catherine whispered as Emma picked at her cereal. Now we're lucky if we get a few words a day. I watched the little girl, noting how she flinched at sudden sounds, how she kept the stuffed horse positioned between herself and the world. Classic trauma responses. I'd seen the same behaviors in horses that had been abused or frightened. Would you like to help me feed the other horses today? I asked Emma gently. Not Thunder, just the gentle ones. Emma's grip tightened on her stuffed animal. She shook her head and ran back to the house, but something told me not to give up. That afternoon, I tried a different approach. Instead of asking Emma to come to the stables, I brought one of the gentlest horses, a sweet old mare named Daisy, to the fence near the house. Emma watched from her bedroom window as I brushed Daisy's coat and talked to her softly. I made sure to stay where Emma could see everything, demonstrating that horses could be safe and predictable. After an hour, Emma crept onto the back porch, still clutching her stuffed horse. She didn't come any closer, but she watched. It was something. That night, Stuart called again. This time, his voice was different, desperate, almost frantic. Mama, I need you to reconsider. About the money. Stuart, I told you, it's not just the procedures anymore. There are other things, debts we didn't know about. If we don't pay, there could be consequences. Something cold settled in my stomach. What kind of debts? I can't explain over the phone. But Mama, I'm scared, really scared. And I don't know what else to do. The fear in his voice was real. Whatever was happening, it was serious enough to crack through his usual weakness and reach something deeper. How much? I asked quietly. $2,000, maybe more. $2,000. I didn't have a fraction of that amount. I'll see what I can do, I said, knowing it was impossible but unable to abandon my child completely. After I hung up, I sat in my little loft apartment, staring out at the moonlit pastures. Below me, Thunder paced restlessly in his stall, as troubled by his demons as I was by mine. Somewhere in the main house, a little girl was probably having nightmares about accidents and broken trust. We were all broken in our own ways. The horse who'd forgotten how to feel safe, the child who'd lost her voice, and the old woman who couldn't seem to stop loving people who only saw her as useful. But maybe, just maybe, we could help each other heal. I had no idea how yet, but something deep in my bones told me that this place, these broken souls, were exactly where I was meant to be, even if I didn't understand why. 2 weeks into my stay at the Whitmore estate, I'd established a routine that felt almost normal. Up before dawn to feed the horses, mucking stalls while the morning mist still clung to the pastures, Then the careful dance of trying to reach two traumatized souls, one four-legged, one human. Thunder had made small progress. He no longer bolted to the corner when I approached his stall, and sometimes he'd even take a carrot from my outstretched hand. But Emma remained a mystery, watching from windows and doorways, but never coming close enough to touch. That Thursday morning changed everything. I was cleaning Thunder's stall when I heard Catherine on the phone with someone, her voice sharp with frustration. She was standing just outside the stable entrance, pacing as she talked. "No, Dr. Martinez. I don't think more medication is the answer. She's 5 years old, for God's sake." A pause. "Yes, I understand the nightmares are severe, but drugging her into compliance isn't healing." I kept working, trying not to eavesdrop, but Catherine's distress was palpable. "What do you mean, institutionalization? She's not dangerous. She's traumatized." Catherine's voice cracked. "There has to be another way." My hand stilled on the pitchfork. Institutionalization? For a 5-year-old girl whose only crime was being too scared to speak? After Catherine hung up, she stood there for a long moment, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. When she finally turned around, she looked surprised to see me. "I'm sorry, Velma. I didn't realize you were there." "It's all right. Are you okay?" She laughed bitterly. "Emma's therapist thinks she needs inpatient treatment. Says her selective mutism and anxiety are too severe for outpatient therapy." She wiped her eyes. "My husband is starting to agree with him. What do you think?" "I think my daughter needs love and patience, not to be locked away with strangers who don't understand her." Catherine looked toward Thunder's stall. "But I'm running out of options. And time." That afternoon, desperation drove me to try something I'd never done before. I brought Thunder out of his stall, not for riding or training, just to stand in the aisle where Emma might see him from the house. He was nervous, dancing at the end of the lead rope, but he trusted me enough now to follow. I started talking to him the way I always did, telling him about my morning, about the other horses, about anything that came to mind. And slowly, gradually, I began to share pieces of my own story. "You know, Thunder, I understand what it's like to be afraid of people you should trust." His ears flicked toward my voice. "My husband, Emma's grandfather, he wasn't always a kind man, especially when he'd been drinking." Thunder stood still, listening. "There were nights I'd hide in the barn with the animals, just like Emma hides in the house. Felt safer with creatures who couldn't hurt me with words." I stroked his neck gently. "But you know what I learned? The hiding doesn't make the fear go away. It just makes the world smaller." A movement caught my eye. Emma stood at the kitchen window, her face pressed against the glass. But instead of running away like usual, she stayed there, watching. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is take one small step toward what scares us," I continued, speaking to Thunder but knowing Emma could probably hear me through the open window. "Not a big leap, just one tiny step." Emma disappeared from the window and I felt my heart sink. But then I heard the back door open, footsteps on gravel. I didn't turn around, didn't want to spook her, but I kept talking to Thunder about courage and trust and taking things slow. "Mrs. Velma?" The voice was so small I almost missed it. I turned slowly. Emma stood 20 feet away, clutching her stuffed horse, her eyes wide with fear but also something else, curiosity. "Hello, sweetheart," I said gently. "Would you like to meet Thunder properly?" She shook her head quickly, but she didn't run. "That's okay. You can just watch from there. Thunder and I were just having a conversation about being scared." "Is he scared?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. My heart leaped. She'd spoken. More than one word, a complete sentence. "Yes, honey, he is. Something bad happened to him, and now he's forgotten how to feel safe. Kind of like you, I think." Emma took a small step forward. "What happened to him?" "He was in an accident. Got hurt real bad. Now he thinks all new experiences might hurt him too." I kept my voice calm, conversational. "But you know what? The accident wasn't his fault. Sometimes bad things just happen, and it's nobody's fault at all." Another step closer. "The therapist says it's my fault." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "He says I should remember what happened. That if I could remember and talk about it, I'd get better." Emma's voice was getting stronger, but also more upset. But I don't want to remember. It makes my tummy hurt. I knelt down to her level, still holding Thunder's lead rope. Emma, can I tell you a secret? Sometimes grown-ups don't know everything, even when they think they do. She nodded, edging closer. Your mind is trying to protect you by not remembering. That's not bad. That's your brain being smart and keeping you safe. When you're ready to remember, you will. And it won't be because someone else told you to. Emma was only 10 feet away now, close enough that Thunder had noticed her, though he remained calm. Is that what happened to Thunder too? In a way, yes. His mind is protecting him by being extra careful about everything. But watch this. I took a step toward Thunder, and instead of shying away, he lowered his head to nuzzle my hand. See? He's starting to remember that some people can be trusted. How did you do that? Patience. And letting him choose when he was ready to trust again. I smiled at her. Same way your mama is being patient with you. Emma took 2 more steps forward. She was close enough now that I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her small hands trembled as she clutched her stuffed animal. Mrs. Velma, can I tell you something? Of course, honey. I do remember what happened. I just don't want to tell the doctor man. My heart ached for her. You don't have to tell anyone anything until you're ready. But what if I'm never ready? Then that's okay too. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we have with ourselves. Emma was close enough now that Thunder turned his attention to her. Instead of being nervous, he seemed curious about this small human who moved so carefully. He stretched his neck toward her, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. He remembers me, Emma whispered, wonder creeping into her voice. I think he does. And I think he's missed you. For the first time since I'd arrived, Emma smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. That evening, Catherine found me in the stable office, updating feeding charts. Her eyes were red with tears. But these were different tears, tears of relief. She talked to me, Catherine said, sinking into a chair. For an hour, Emma talked to me. About you, about Thunder, about how scared she's been. I'm glad. She also told me what she remembers about the accident. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. Velma. She saw things. Things no child should ever see. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of things? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. My husband was driving the trailer that day. He'd been drinking. When they crashed, he made Emma promise not to tell anyone about the drinking. Told her it would be her fault if he got in trouble. The pieces clicked into place. Emma's selective mutism, her terror of Thunder, the way she flinched around loud noises and sudden movements. She'd been carrying the weight of an adult's secret, believing herself responsible for the trauma. That's why she won't talk to the therapist, I said. She's terrified that if she tells the truth, something bad will happen to her father. But keeping the secret is destroying her. Catherine wiped her eyes. What kind of man puts that burden on a 5-year-old? I thought about my own marriage, about the secrets I'd kept to protect Stuart from knowing what his father was really like. Sometimes people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us most. I've filed for separation, Catherine said quietly. As of this morning, Richard is moving out. How do you feel about that? Terrified, relieved, free. She looked toward Thunder's stall. Emma asked if she could visit Thunder tomorrow. She wants to try brushing him again. That's wonderful. Velma, I don't know how to thank you. In 2 weeks, you've done more for both of them than months of professional therapy. Sometimes healing doesn't come from talking about trauma. Sometimes it comes from feeling safe enough to remember what love looks like. My phone buzzed with a text message. Stuart again, but this time the message made my stomach drop. Mama, we need to talk. In person. It's about the money I owe. These people aren't going to wait much longer. I stared at the message, fear creeping up my throat. What had my son gotten himself into? But then I looked at Catherine, saw hope in her eyes for the first time since I'd arrived, and I made a decision. Whatever was happening with Stuart, whatever debts he'd accumulated, I couldn't abandon this place. Not now. Not when Emma was finally starting to heal. Catherine, I said slowly, Would it be possible to get an advance on my salary? She looked concerned. Of course. How much do you need? Whatever you can spare. I'll work it off, I promise. Without hesitation, Catherine pulled out her checkbook. Will $500 help? It wasn't enough to solve Stuart's problems, but it might buy him some time. And right now, time was all I had to give. As I took the check, I realized something had shifted inside me. For weeks, I'd felt like I was just surviving, just getting by. But today, seeing Emma smile, watching Thunder trust again, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Purpose. For the first time since losing the farm, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even if I had no idea what storm was coming. The transformation in Emma over the next few days was nothing short of miraculous. She spent hours with Thunder, brushing his coat while chattering about everything from cartoons to clouds, to the baby birds nesting in the stable eaves. Her laughter, when it finally came, was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, but my own storm was just beginning. Stuart showed up on Friday afternoon, driving a car I didn't recognize, something expensive and flashy that screamed desperation. He looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands shook as he lit one cigarette after another. "Mama, thank God you're here," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like clinging. "We need to talk." I led him away from the stables, not wanting Emma to witness whatever was about to unfold. We sat on a bench near the edge of the property, far enough from the house that we could speak privately. "Tell me what's really going on, Stuart." He ran his hands through his hair, looking everywhere except at me. It started small, just a few bets here and there. Azalea said I needed to take more risks, be more aggressive about making money. My heart sank. Gambling. It wasn't supposed to be gambling. It was supposed to be investment opportunities. High risk, high reward stuff. He laughed bitterly. Turns out the only thing I was good at was losing. "How much do you owe?" $25,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $25,000. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More than I could earn in 3 years at this job. "Stuart, that's—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. I know how it sounds. But Mama, these aren't the kind of people you just ignore. They've already made it clear what happens if I don't pay up. "What kind of people?" Stuart rolled up his sleeve, revealing a bruise that wrapped around his forearm like a purple bracelet. "The kind who send messages." Fear crawled up my spine with icy fingers. "Have you gone to the police? And tell them what? That I borrowed money from loan sharks to feed my gambling addiction?" Stuart shook his head. "They'd laugh me out of the station." I stared at my son, this man who'd once been a sweet little boy catching fireflies in mason jars, and saw a stranger. "Where's Azalea in all this?" "Gone." The word came out flat, emotionless. "Left 3 days ago. Said she couldn't be associated with this kind of trouble. Took half our stuff and moved back to her mother's. So when things got difficult, when Stuart needed her most, his wife had abandoned him, just like she'd tried to abandon me." "What do you need from me?" I asked, though I already knew I couldn't give him what he needed. "They're giving me until Monday, 4 days to come up with the money or—" He swallowed hard. "They made it clear that family members might become involved if I don't pay." Family members. The threat hung between us like a poison cloud. "I've got $500, I said quietly. "It's all I have." Stuart's face crumpled. 500? "Mama, that's not even close. Then what do you want me to do? Rob a bank?" "The Whitmores," he said suddenly, his eyes lighting up with desperate hope. "They've got money, real money. Maybe you could ask for a loan or—" "Absolutely not." The words came out harder than I intended. "These people have been kind to me, Stuart. I won't exploit their generosity." "So you'll let your own son get hurt rather than ask rich people for help?" The accusation stung because part of it was true. But it wasn't about the money. It was about dignity. "I won't become a beggar even for you." Stuart stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "You don't understand. These people don't just beat you up and move on. They make examples, permanent ones. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started gambling away money you didn't have." The words came out cruel, harsher than I meant them. But I was angry. Angry at Stuart for putting himself in this position. Angry at Azalea for abandoning him when he needed support. Angry at myself for being powerless to fix this. Stuart stopped pacing and stared at me. You know what? Maybe Azalea was right about you. What's that supposed to mean? She said you were selfish, that you only cared about yourself. His voice was getting louder, more desperate. She said that's why Dad left, because you couldn't love anyone but yourself. The words hit me like a slap. My husband hadn't left. He'd died in a farming accident when Stuart was 12, but apparently my son had rewritten history to make me the villain. Your father died, Stuart. He didn't leave us. Same difference. He escaped. And now I understand why. I stood up slowly, feeling suddenly old and tired. I think you should go. Fine. When they come for me, when something happens to me, just remember that you could have prevented it. He stormed off toward his car, but before he could reach it, a black sedan pulled up the driveway. 2 men got out. Big men in expensive suits who moved with the kind of controlled menace that made my blood run cold. Stuart froze, his face going white as paper. The larger of the 2 men approached us with a smile that never reached his eyes. Stuart Hartwell, we've been looking for you. I've got until Monday, Stuart said, his voice cracking. That's what Vince said. Plans change. The man's gaze shifted to me. You must be Stuart's mother. We've heard a lot about you. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I stood my ground. What do you want? Just to have a friendly conversation about Stuart's debt. He pulled out a piece of paper. See, your boy here has been avoiding our calls. Makes us nervous when clients don't communicate. I glanced at the paper. It wasn't just a debt notice. It was a contract with interest rates that looked more like phone numbers. Stuart owed $25,000, but with penalties and interest, the total had ballooned to almost $40,000. This is illegal, I said. The man's smile widened. What's illegal is borrowing money you can't pay back. We're just businessmen trying to collect what's owed. I told you, I don't have that kind of money, Stuart said desperately. But your mama here works for the Whitmores. Rich folks like that, they've got deep pockets, charitable inclinations. Understanding dawned like a cold sunrise. They hadn't just come for Stuart. They'd come for me. They wanted me to beg the Whitmores for money, to exploit the only genuine kindness I'd found in months. No, I said firmly. I won't do that. The second man, who'd been silent until now, stepped closer. Maybe you don't understand the situation, ma'am. I understand it perfectly, and my answer is still no. Stuart grabbed my arm. Mama, please. Just ask them. Just see if they might help. I looked at my son, at the fear in his eyes, at the bruises on his arm, and felt my resolve wavering. He was my child, my baby boy. How could I stand by and let something terrible happen to him? But then I thought about Emma, about how she'd been forced to carry an adult's secrets, about Catherine trusting me with her daughter's healing, about Thunder finally learning to trust again. I won't betray the people who've shown me kindness, I said quietly. The first man nodded slowly. Well, that's disappointing, but we're patient people, we can wait. He handed me a business card. When you change your mind, and you will change your mind, give us a call. They got back in their sedan and drove away, leaving Stuart and me standing in the shadow of their threat. I can't believe you, Stuart said, his voice breaking. Your own son. My own son got himself into this mess, and now I'm going to pay for it. Maybe permanently. He got into his flashy car and peeled out of the driveway, leaving me alone with the weight of an impossible choice. That evening, I found Catherine in the stables with Emma. Mother and daughter were grooming Thunder together. Emma chattering happily about a butterfly she'd seen earlier. The sight should have filled me with joy, but all I could think about was the business card burning a hole in my pocket. Velma? There you are, Catherine said, smiling. Emma has some news to share. Emma beamed up at me. Mrs. Velma, I talked to Daddy on the phone today. I told him about Thunder and about you and about how I'm not scared anymore. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Mama says maybe he can visit next weekend, if he promises not to drink anymore. Emma's voice was serious, mature beyond her years. I told him I would only see him if he promises to tell the truth from now on. Catherine's eyes were bright with tears. She's been working with a new therapist, someone who specializes in trauma from family secrets. It's made all the difference, family secrets. The irony wasn't lost on me. What about you, Mrs. Velma? Emma asked. Do you have any family secrets? The innocent question hit me like a lightning bolt. Here was this brave little girl, learning to speak her truth, and I was keeping secrets that could destroy the peace she'd found. Emma, I said carefully, sometimes grown-ups have problems that are too big for children to help with, but you helped me with my problems. That was different. How? Catherine must have sensed something in my voice because she looked at me more carefully. Velma, is everything all right? I wanted to tell her. I wanted to confess everything. About Stuart's debts, about the men who'd threatened us, about the impossible choice I was facing. But looking at Emma's trusting eyes, at Catherine's peaceful expression, I couldn't bring myself to shatter their newfound happiness. Everything's fine, I lied, just tired. But that night, lying in my small bed above the stables, I knew that everything was far from fine. The business card sat on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. Stuart's words echoed in my head. When something happens to me, just remember that you could have prevented it. Could I live with myself if something terrible happened to Stuart? Could I live with myself if I betrayed the Whitmore's trust? Outside my window, thunder nickered softly in his stall, a sound of contentment and security. Emma would be sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, no longer haunted by nightmares. I'd helped heal 2 broken spirits, but now I faced a choice that might break my own. The men would be back. They'd made that clear. And when they returned, I would have to decide what mattered more, protecting my son or protecting the family who'd shown me what love without conditions looked like. Either way, someone I cared about was going to get hurt. The call came at 3 a.m. I jerked awake in my small loft bed, my heart hammering as I fumbled for the phone in the darkness. The number was unfamiliar, but somehow I knew. Mrs. Hartwell? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Dr. Sarah Chen at Riverside General Hospital. Your son Stuart was brought in an hour ago. My blood turned to ice water. Is he? He's alive, but he's been severely beaten. Multiple contusions, 2 broken ribs, and a concussion. He's asking for you. I was dressed and in my old pickup truck within minutes, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. The 40-minute drive to the hospital felt like hours, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. Stuart was awake when I reached his room, but barely recognizable. Both eyes were swollen shut, his lips split, his left arm in a cast. When he tried to speak, it came out as a painful whisper. Mama. I sat beside his bed, taking his uninjured hand in mine. I'm here, baby. I'm here. They said this was just a warning. Each word seemed to cost him enormous effort. Next time, they won't stop. The nurse, a kind woman with gentle eyes, pulled me aside. The police want to speak with him, but he's refused to give them any information. Says it was just a mugging. A mugging. We both knew better. How long will he need to stay here? At least a week, maybe longer. The head injury is concerning. She paused. Mrs. Hartwell, I've seen cases like this before. If your son doesn't get help, real help, this won't be the last time we see him here. I spent the rest of the night in that uncomfortable hospital chair, watching Stuart sleep fitfully, his face twitching with pain, even in unconsciousness. Every sound in the corridor made me jump, wondering if the men would come here too. When morning came, I called Catherine to explain I wouldn't be able to work. I expected questions, concern, maybe even irritation at the short notice. Instead, her voice was full of warmth and worry. Take all the time you need, Velma. Is there anything we can do to help? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. This was it. My chance to ask for help, to beg for the money that could save Stuart's life. All I had to do was betray their trust. No, I said quietly. Thank you, but no. When I hung up, Stuart's swollen eyes were open, watching me. You could have asked, he whispered. I know. So you're just going to let them kill me? The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But something inside me had hardened overnight, sitting in that hospital chair. You made these choices, Stuart. I can't unmake them for you. His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the little boy I'd raised, the one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I'm scared, Mama. I know, baby. I'm scared too. That afternoon, the men found me in the hospital parking garage. I wasn't surprised. I'd been expecting them. Mrs. Hartwell. The larger man approached with that same cold smile. Terrible thing, what happened to your boy? Random violence is such a problem these days. What do you want? Same thing we wanted before. A simple conversation with your employers about helping out a neighbor in need. He pulled out his phone, showing me photos. Pictures of the Whitmore estate, of Catherine's car, of Emma playing in the garden. Beautiful family. Lovely little girl. The threat was crystal clear. They weren't just going after Stuart anymore. You touched that child, I started. We're not violent people, Mrs. Hartwell. We're businessmen. But business has deadlines. He put the phone away. 48 hours. After that, we'll have to explore other collection methods. They drove away, leaving me shaking in the shadow of the parking garage. Not just from fear, but from rage. How dare they threaten Emma? How dare they drag an innocent child into Stuart's mess? I drove back to the Whitmore estate in a haze of fury and desperation. The property looked different somehow, more vulnerable. I found myself scanning the tree line, looking for black sedans and unfriendly faces. Catherine met me at the stables, her expression concerned. How is your son? He'll recover. Eventually. Velma, you look terrible. When's the last time you ate anything? I couldn't remember. Catherine led me to the main house, settling me at the kitchen table while she made tea and sandwiches. The normalcy of it, the kindness, almost broke me. Do you want to talk about what's really going on? She asked gently. For a moment, I wavered. The whole story sat on the tip of my tongue, begging to be told. But then Emma burst through the back door, her face bright with excitement. Mrs. Velma, you're back! Thunder missed you. He kept looking toward your room all morning. She stopped, noticing my expression. Are you sad? A little bit, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have sad days. Emma climbed onto the chair beside me, her small hand patting my arm with surprising gentleness. When I have sad days, Thunder makes me feel better. Maybe he could help you too. The innocent offer made my throat tight. That's very kind of you, Emma. Want to see something cool? I taught Thunder a new trick while you were gone. Catherine nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, show her. Emma led me out to Thunder's stall, chattering excitedly about how she'd been working with him all morning. The horse greeted us with a soft whinny, no trace of the traumatized animal I'd first met weeks ago. Watch this, Emma said, producing a carrot from her pocket. She held it out to Thunder, but instead of taking it immediately, the horse gently nuzzled her cheek first. A gesture of affection I'd never seen from him before. He's saying thank you, Emma explained solemnly, for helping him remember how to trust people again. The simple moment shattered something inside me. Here was this child, this precious little girl who'd overcome her own trauma, teaching a broken horse about trust and gratitude. And I was contemplating bringing violence and danger into her world. Emma, I said carefully, if someone asked you to do something that might hurt Thunder, what would you say? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. I'd say no. Nobody gets to hurt Thunder anymore. Not ever. Even if they said something bad might happen if you didn't do what they wanted? Emma's face grew serious, older than her 5 years. Mrs. Velma, bad people try to make you scared so you'll do bad things. But when you do bad things because you're scared, you just become bad people too. The wisdom of it took my breath away. From the mouths of babes. That evening, I sat in my loft apartment, staring at the business card and my phone. 48 hours had become 24. Stuart was still in the hospital, still vulnerable. The men had made their threats clear, but Emma's words echoed in my head. When you do bad things because you're scared, you just become bad people too. I thought about Catherine's trust, about the peace Emma had found, about Thunder learning to feel safe again. I thought about the life I'd built here, small but honest, hard but meaningful. Then I thought about Stuart, lying broken in that hospital bed. My phone rang. Catherine's number. "Velma, I hope you don't mind me calling so late. I've been thinking about you all day, and I wanted you to know, whatever's troubling you, you don't have to face it alone." The kindness in her voice almost undid me. "Catherine, I know we haven't known each other long, but you've become family to us. To Emma especially. If you need help, any kind of help, please let us give it. Family." She'd called me family. "There's something I need to tell you," I said before I could lose my courage. I told her everything. About Stuart's gambling, about the loan sharks, about the threats against Emma. With each word, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, even as I watched my job, my home, my sanctuary slip away. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long time. "Velma," Catherine finally said, "thank you for telling me the truth. I understand if you want me to leave." "Leave? Velma, you've just proven why we need you here more than ever. You chose to protect Emma over protecting yourself. That's not the action of someone I'd want to lose." Tears ran down my cheeks. "But the money. Money can be replaced. Trust can't. You've earned ours completely." The next morning, I was surprised to see a police car in the driveway when I went to feed the horses. 2 officers were talking with Catherine on the front porch, their expressions serious but not unfriendly. "Velma," Catherine called out, "could you join us, please?" My heart hammered as I approached. Had Stuart told them something? Were the loan sharks already making good on their threats? "Mrs. Hartwell," the older officer said, "we understand you've had some visitors making threats against your family and employers." I glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sir. We've been tracking this particular organization for months. Your information could be exactly what we need to shut them down." "What about my son?" "Your son will be placed in protective custody until we can make arrests. It's not perfect, but it's safe." That afternoon, everything moved quickly. Stuart was transferred to a secure wing of the hospital under police protection. I gave my statement to detectives who seemed genuinely interested in stopping the loan sharks, not just collecting information. "You did the right thing," the lead detective told me. "These people count on fear and silence. When victims speak up, we can actually help them." As evening fell, I found Emma in Thunder's stall, reading him a story from one of her picture books. The horse stood patiently, occasionally nuzzling the top of her head as she turned pages. "Mrs. Velma," she said when she saw me, "Mama told me some bad people were trying to scare you." "Yes, sweetheart. But it's over now." "Did you tell the truth even though you were scared?" "I did." Emma beamed at me with pride. "Thunder says that's the bravest thing anyone can do." As if in agreement, Thunder nickered softly and stepped closer to nuzzle my shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection that would have been impossible weeks ago. Standing there with Emma and Thunder, surrounded by the peace of the stable and the warmth of genuine affection, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I'd chosen the right thing over the easy thing. I'd chosen love over fear. The price had been terrifying to contemplate, but the reward was beyond anything I could have imagined. 6 months later, I stood in the same spot where I'd first met Thunder. But everything had changed. The black stallion stood calmly as Emma brushed his coat, her chatter filling the stable with warmth and life. Occasionally, he'd lower his head to nuzzle her shoulder, a gesture of affection that still took my breath away. "Mrs. Velma," Emma called out, "look what Thunder learned." She held up a small hoop, and Thunder, responding to her gentle command, stepped through it carefully. It was a simple trick, but the trust it represented was profound. 6 months ago, this horse had been too traumatized to let anyone near him. Now he was performing for the pure joy of pleasing a little girl who'd found her voice again. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You two make quite a team." The legal proceedings had concluded the month before. The loan shark operation had been shut down completely, with several arrests made. Stuart had testified against them in exchange for a reduced sentence on charges related to his gambling activities. He was currently serving 6 months in minimum security. But more importantly, he was getting the help he needed. "Mama, they won't really try to hurt him in prison, will they?" he'd asked during one of my visits, fear replacing his usual defensiveness. "You're in protective custody, and the men who threatened you are facing federal charges. You're as safe as you can be." I'd paused, studying his face. "The real question is, what are you going to do when you get out?" "I want to get clean. Really clean. Not just from the gambling, but from all of it. The lying, the manipulating, the taking advantage of people who love me." His voice had been steady, more honest than I'd heard it in years. "I want to be the son you deserved." "You already are, Stuart. You just forgot for a while." Now, watching Emma giggle as Thunder gently lipped carrot pieces from her palm, I marveled at how healing could happen in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes it took a crisis to show us what really mattered. "Velma." Catherine's voice made me turn. She was approaching with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, silver-haired, with kind eyes and an expensive suit that somehow didn't make him seem intimidating. "I'd like you to meet Dr. James Morrison," Catherine said. "He's a child psychologist who specializes in equine therapy." Dr. Morrison extended his hand with a warm smile. "Mrs. Hartwell, I've heard remarkable things about your work with Emma and Thunder. I'm not trained in anything formal, doctor. I just spent time with them. Sometimes that's exactly what healing requires." He glanced toward Emma, who was now sitting in the straw while Thunder stood protectively over her, like a guardian angel with hooves. "Catherine tells me you have an intuitive understanding of trauma recovery. I've lived through some things. Animals and children aren't so different when they've been hurt." Dr. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to make you a proposition. I'm opening a therapeutic riding program for children who've experienced trauma. I need someone with your instincts, your patience, and your understanding of both horses and healing." I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a career. The position comes with full benefits, professional training, and a salary of $45,000 annually to start." $45,000. More money than I'd ever made in my life, doing work that felt more like a calling than a job. "I don't have any formal education," I said quietly. "You have something more valuable than education. You have wisdom." Dr. Morrison smiled. "And if you're interested, we can arrange for you to get certification through our program. Education can be taught, but what you have, that gift for seeing into the hearts of broken creatures, that's rare." I looked at Emma, who had heard our conversation and was practically vibrating with excitement. "Would you still get to work with Thunder and me?" she asked hopefully. "If your mama agrees, Thunder would be one of our therapy horses. You could visit whenever you want and help other children learn to trust again." Emma threw her arms around Thunder's neck. "Did you hear that, boy? We get to help other kids who are scared." Thunder whinnied softly as if he understood perfectly. That evening, Catherine and I sat on the porch of the main house, watching Emma play in the garden while Thunder grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture. The scene was so perfect it almost hurt to look at. "Are you going to take the job?" Catherine asked. "I think so. It feels right." "Good. You deserve to have work that feeds your soul, not just pays your bills." Catherine sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "Do you regret it? Choosing to protect us over protecting Stuart?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that Stuart got hurt. I regret that I couldn't save him from his own choices. But protecting you and Emma? No, I don't regret that for a second. Even though he's your son? Especially because he's my son. The best thing I could do for Stuart was show him that love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "You know, when Richard first left, I was terrified that I'd made the wrong choice, that I should have kept quiet about his drinking, kept the family together at any cost." "What changed your mind?" "Watching Emma heal, seeing her learn to speak her truth without fear. I realized that keeping secrets to protect someone else's reputation isn't love. It's enabling." She smiled sadly. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's dysfunction." A car pulled up the driveway and I recognized Stuart's beat-up sedan. He'd been released 2 days early for good behavior and was staying at a halfway house in town while he looked for work and attended counseling. Emma squealed with delight when she saw him get out of the car. "Uncle Stuart, come see what Thunder can do." Stuart had visited several times during his incarceration, always supervised, always brief, but Emma had taken to him immediately, perhaps recognizing a fellow soul in recovery. "Hey there, little bit," Stuart said, kneeling to accept her hug. "I hear you and Thunder have been busy. We've been learning how to help scared kids feel better. Mrs. Velma is going to be a real therapist." Stuart looked at me with something like pride in his eyes. "Is that right?" "It's a new opportunity, working with children and horses. That's perfect for you, Mama. You always were better with wounded things than most people." The comment stung a little, but I understood what he meant. "How are you doing, Stuart?" "Really?" "Better. Scared, but better." He sat on the porch steps, watching Emma demonstrate Thunder's latest tricks. "I've got a job interview next week. Nothing fancy. Maintenance work at a school district. But it's honest work. That's all that matters. I know you probably don't trust me yet. I know I've got a lot to make up for. Trust is earned over time, not words. But you're making progress." Stuart was quiet for a moment, watching Emma laugh as Thunder gently nibbled her hair. "She's lucky to have you in her life." "I'm the lucky one." "No, Mama. You're the one who gives love without keeping score. That's rare." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma insisted on showing Stuart everything. Thunder's tricks, her favorite hiding spots in the stable, the baby birds that had hatched in the eaves. "You know what the best part is?" Emma told Stuart seriously. "Thunder used to be scared of everything, just like me. But Mrs. Velma helped us remember that being scared doesn't mean being broken." Stuart glanced at me over Emma's head, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's a pretty wise thing to remember. Later, after Stuart had left and Emma was tucked into bed, I walked out to check on the horses one final time. Thunder approached the fence when he saw me, no longer the terrified animal I'd first encountered. "You've come a long way, boy," I murmured, stroking his neck. "We all have." The horse leaned into my touch, content and trusting. In the distance, I could see lights from the main house, where Catherine was probably reading Emma a bedtime story. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up safe and loved, ready to help other children find their voices. Stuart would continue his recovery, one day at a time. Thunder would carry wounded children on his strong back, teaching them about resilience and trust. And me? I'd found something I'd never expected to find at 63 years old, a purpose that went beyond mere survival. I'd discovered that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted was the only way to find everything you actually needed. My phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Morrison. "Start date confirmed for next month. Looking forward to having you on our team." I smiled, tucking the phone away. For the first time in my adult life, I was looking forward to the future instead of just enduring the present. Standing there in the peaceful night, surrounded by creatures who'd learned to trust again, I realized something profound. I'd spent most of my life believing that love meant sacrifice, that caring for others required diminishing myself. But that wasn't love. That was fear masquerading as virtue. Real love, I'd learned, sometimes meant saying no. It meant refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when that behavior came from people you'd die for. It meant choosing what was right over what was easy. Thunder nickered softly and stepped closer to the fence, resting his great head against my shoulder. In that simple gesture, I felt the weight of months of patient work, of small daily choices to show up and try again, even when progress seemed impossible. "Thank you," I whispered to the horse, to the night, to whatever force had brought me to this place where broken things could heal. Thunder's response was to breathe gently against my neck, warm and alive and completely present. It was answer enough. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.